We're at the Alabama Music Hall of Fame in Tuscumbia, Alabama. This serves as a showcase for all of the famous Muscle Shoals music, and we're here with Dixie Connell, who is Marketing and Sales Manager at the Alabama Music Hall of Fame, and Terry Pace, who is a music historian. Terry, tell us what it is that we can find here at the Alabama Music Hall of Fame that features our famous Muscle Shoals music.
Well, there's a wealth of resources and information and visual elements and artifacts here, starting with this Hall of Inductees. There are a great many of the Music Hall of Fame inductees, including some of the very earliest ones who have very strong connections to the Muscle Shoals area, either through making their musical mark here in the Muscle Shoals music industry or being from the Muscle Shoals area and making their mark elsewhere, and still calling Muscle Shoals home and having a hand in what happened here musically. For instance, you have Buddy Killen, the late great Buddy Killen, who was the premier publisher in Nashville, who's from the Shoals area and came back down here to produce. You have Billy Sherrill, who's one of the founders of Fame Publishing, the first publishing company associated with the Fame name brand. And Billy Sherrill, of course, became Nashville's hottest producer. And then right to the right of Buddy Killen there, you have Rick Hall, who dug in his heels to make it happen here in Muscle Shoals and became known as basically the father of Muscle Shoals music. Right below Rick, you have the first national hit recording artist to come from Muscle Shoals, Arthur Alexander, who 50 years ago next year recorded the very first national hit to come out of this area, produced by Rick Hall, and that was, of course, You Better Move On. And Arthur Alexander is the only artist and songwriter to have written or originated songs recorded by the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Elvis Presley, and Bob Dylan. The first Beatles album includes an Arthur Alexander song called Anna. The first Rolling Stones album includes their cover of You Better Move On. Elvis recorded Burning Love after he heard Arthur Alexander's version of Burning Love, and Bob Dylan recorded Arthur Alexander's song called Sally Sue Brown. Right to the left of Arthur Alexander is Norbert Putnam, who produced Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville and Joan Baez's The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. Very famous Nashville music maker who's from Muscle Shoals and who played bass on You Better Move On and was one of Rick's original session musicians. Also in this area you have W.C. Handy, the father of the blues, who's from the Muscle Shoals area, who became the first music maker from this area to export the music and to give it a name. He called it the blues, and all of the Southern soul music made here in the 60s is really blues-based, rhythm and blues, of course. And Handy never recorded here, but he came back here frequently, and he always called the Shoals his home. And he was very instrumental in being the spiritual father of what happened here. Known as the father of the blues and then the father of rock and roll, Sam Phillips. A couple of generations later, Sam followed Handy to Memphis, and he loved the blues as well and opened his doors to black blues artists who were inspired by Handy. And then, of course, through discovering Elvis Presley, Sam brought rock and roll, united black and white, broke down every barrier in the book, and brought rock and roll and blues-based music to a much, much wider audience. Of course, as they say, Muddy Waters once said, the blues had a baby and they named it rock and roll. So it's appropriate that the father of the blues and the father of rock and roll were both from this area and both continued to call this area home until their deaths. And really what Sam Phillips did in Memphis with his Memphis recording service and his Sun Records label was sort of the blueprint for one of his disciples. Rick Hall called Sam Phillips his mentor, and Billy Sherrill was hired to go to Nashville by Sam Phillips. So a lot of cross-pollination, a lot of creative synergy that went on in Memphis, in Nashville, and in Muscle Shoals. And those three music centers really wouldn't exist without the talent from this area. Up above Sam here is Kelso Hurston. And Kelso, who played on the first recording, the first commercial recording made here, A Fallen Star, ended up being hired by Sam Phillips to go to Nashville to run his publishing company. And Kelso became known as the master of the commercial jingle, producing I Wish I Were an Oscar Mayer Wiener, 7-Up the Young Cola, and Red Lobster for the Seafood Lover in You. And he was Nashville's top guitar picker for 13 consecutive years. And that's just in this one corner, all of the musical influences Muscle Shoals has made over the past century.
That last little story is sort of human interest, and we'll turn to Dixie now to maybe tell us some of the things that your guests find interesting about the Alabama Music Hall of Fame when they're here.
Well, of course, most people just are amazed about the number of great people that we do have from the state of Alabama. They always say, wow, I didn't know Nat King Cole was from Alabama, or this one or that one. So we have so many wonderful artists from Alabama that people don't even realize are from here. And of course, as they journey through our museum, everybody loves Alabama, the group Alabama's tour bus. They want to know how we got it in here and the story of that. And they love to go aboard and kind of sit on the couches, and somebody sits in that driver's seat and gets a feel of what it would be like to travel on that bus. So that's you know, a great thing to have in the museum. And then lately, I've been telling the story about Buddy Killen and you know, his the founding of Tree Publishing and how they worked so hard, and his generosity when he gave Donna Healy the check for $1 million.
Which is in the museum.
Well, yeah, we have a copy of that check, and you know, you don't just see $1 million check laid around. So that's gotten a lot of attention lately, and people enjoy hearing that story and seeing that check. And of course, you know, Happy Hal's car with all the guns and silver dollars and all, that's a great thing to see. And then before people leave, our songwriters section. That jukebox in there with all the songs written by people from Alabama that became hit records. They love that. Before they leave, many times we have couples in there dancing and just enjoying the music and enjoying the history of all of our songwriters. So there's so many things that people really do enjoy about our museum, and we're so proud to have it here.
That's great, Dixie, and our international travelers are also surprised at the history here, but actually oftentimes know more about it than some of our own local people.
That's true.
Terry, could you maybe run a few names of some of the performers who have made their name with their recordings out of this area? You mentioned a lot about the individuals who provided the background, but who are some of the artists?
Well, some of the artists encompass the rest of the state, which is one of the neat things about the museum, is that there are a lot of the music makers who are from other parts of the state who made their musical mark here in Muscle Shoals. You have Wilson Pickett, you have Clarence Carter, you have Eddie Floyd, who recorded in Memphis as well as here, as Wilson Pickett did. So a lot of other Alabamians came here, but Muscle Shoals also brought world-class artists who had no connection to Alabama. And that all happened really after Percy Sledge's When a Man Loves a Woman. And then Aretha Franklin with I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You, and Do Right Woman, Do Right Man. That Southern Soul era brought in Otis Redding, brought in Etta James, and so many others. And then just a few years later, the establishment of Muscle Shoals Sound Studios, and these four guys up here who call themselves the Muscle Shoals Rhythm Section, those are the guys who are known as the Swampers. And even people all over the world who know nothing about Muscle Shoals know the name because of the Leonard Skinner Southern rock anthem, Sweet Home Alabama. Even if they don't know what the line means, Muscle Shoals has got the Swampers, and they've been known to pick a song or two. They've at least heard of Muscle Shoals. But those are the Swampers. They got that nickname through Denny Cordell and Leon Russell, who said they had this kind of swamp music sound as a rhythm section. And once they established Muscle Shoals Sound, the sound diversified greatly. Suddenly you had Traffic coming here, you had the Rolling Stones coming here, you had Cher here, Linda Ronstadt, Bob Seger, Paul Simon, Joe Cocker, and so many, many others during that heyday when this area was known as the hit recording capital of the world. And the list goes on and on. Then over at Fame you had Liza Minnelli, you had the Osmonds, which were diametrically opposed to what had been done here so many times in the past. You had Dr. Hook, I mentioned Rod Stewart, but you had Bobby Gentry. All of these artists, including country artists, acts that were from here, like Shenandoah, acts that were from the state of Alabama, like Alabama, which came here, and then other big country acts came in as well during that time. And the music goes on today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, before you leave, I'm going to step in there with you.
Yay, come on.
And we're going